Hello and welcome to the first episode of the NetScaler podcast. My name is Brian Hune and I'm joined by my co-host, Jason Poole. Together with you, we're going to explore the ins and outs of application delivery and security, deep dive into stories from the industry, and learn about the business challenges which face IT teams and how they're able to overcome them. With that, Jason, you want to introduce our guest for today?
Sure, thanks, Brian. And in our first podcast episode, we're going to explore a topic that's very dear to my heart, and that is the premise that ADCs are more important to businesses today than ever before. And to do that, we're joined by our good friend Abhilash Verma, who's the GM of NetScaler. Abhilash, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Brian.
Now, Abhilash, you've been in this ADC industry longer than me. What is it, 20 years with NetScaler? Yeah. And I noticed that you started off as a software engineer before moving into product management and then on to the heady heights of general manager. How does that path from software engineer give you a different perspective into the ADC industry today?
Yeah, well, Jason, it has just been very exciting for me. It's been a journey full of learning. I would say full of failures, a lot of success, a lot of fun on the way, right? I came with a background of dealing with customers because I before NetScaler I used to be an information security consultant, working with customers directly. So I always wanted to kind of get in touch with customers, and so I had a curiosity around, hey, how does this technology really get deployed? How do our customers really get the value out of NetScaler? What are the use cases? So back in the days, Jason, and I think that's the time when you got into NetScaler as well. I remember in the field people used to call me Super SE because if there is a big POC, everybody or the folks would say, hey, get the Super SE sitting next to the team in the POC so that you have coverage and you want to win, right? And that's how I got exposed to a lot of customers very early on. And at some point in 2008-9, I decided to move over to the product side because I felt that I could contribute with all of my learnings in the engineering organization, understanding of how NetScaler works, what's the platform look like, how does it scale, how does it help our customers. Now I started my journey on the product end, really interacting with customers, understanding their next generation requirements, bringing it back into the team, building it into the product. And I remember my first project, which was clustering. Jason, I think you would remember that, right?
I remember
Uh,
it well.
yeah, so clustering, and this is a classic example of why NetScaler is different because, uh, when we started thinking about clustering, it was, I think, this very similar timeline when F5 introduced their Viprion chassis and Cisco had their chassis, and everybody was like, hey, go build a chassis because that's how you scale. And I remember sitting down with Anil and Rajiv Mirani and Rajiv Sinha, all of us brainstorming, and I was the PM on the project, and we were like, "Hey, why would we just go and build a chassis? I mean, we have never been a hardware-based solution. We have all our IP is in software. So we decided to innovate with clustering, which is an innovation nobody has come close to even today, like 12 years down, right? Because you could cluster a series of MPXs, you could cluster a series of VPXs, SDXs, DLX today out of the box, right? You don't have to have a backplane, you don't require a chassis, you don't need these software images sit close to each other. I mean, we have customers who do clustering across data center, across multiple racks, right? So that is the kind of innovation and differentiation the NetScaler team always believed in to build, right? And then from there on, obviously, I started to run the global product management, and as we became cloud software group, I think I got lucky. It was right timing, right opportunity, and I was asked to run the BU. I'm really glad to be there in this position, and really glad to have people like you, have people like Anil, Neha, Matthew, so many of us, right, who have been here at NetScaler, dedicated our careers and in some sense our lives because we want to see it succeed. right? That's how I look at the journey.
Mhm.
Okay.
Now,
And
I've
that's
got
good.
a
Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
yeah. I just before we dive in too deep into the weeds, for those watching and listening that might not be as familiar with the topic, you mentioned the term load balancer, but what we know it today is an application delivery controller or ADC. Could you maybe walk us through a bit of that history of how you've seen the industry grow and change, and particularly how's the problem that our customers face changed and grown, and how we've been able to solve that?
No, I think very, very rightly put, Brian, because you know I started with that we did not design ourselves to be a load balancer, right? We designed ourselves to be an acceleration, optimization, performance, and a scale device. But after Citrix acquisition, as we started working with closely with the CVAD use case, which was one of the large enterprise application, we got exposed to several other enterprise applications like Exchange, SharePoint, SAP, Oracle, internal IT apps. And at that point, that we were like, hey, we have the stack. By the virtue of what we do load balancing, but we don't want to be a load balancer. We don't want to get into a load balancing market to compete. And there we started working with Gartner to define the application delivery controller market. I remember very early discussions with Mark Fabi and others where we used to debate that, hey, what would an ADC be, right? And an application delivery controller is much more than a load balancer because it is truly a layer 7 device which understand application behaviors, application workloads. uh, you know if you really want the ADC to do a perfect job at delivering applications, you need to understand what's difference in between an Exchange and a SharePoint. You need to understand what's difference in between a payment application versus a data heavy application, right? And we built all of those in NetScaler over the period. We built what we call today the policy modules, the policy infrastructure, on top of which our critical capabilities like rewrite, responder, run. I mean, all of that, the application templates, the new style books were designed to be application friendly, right? And as we continue to innovate ourselves, we are at a point where we are bringing in the next gen APIs to make it super easy, super simple to deploy applications in like easy, quick step and get the application delivery up and running.
Cool.
And while I want to talk about NetScaler in particular all day long, I wonder if we can just lift this out a little bit and just talk about the general. So IDC figures show that the ADC shipments are $2 billion plus and continuing to grow year on year. So my question is this the golden age of ADCs, and why are they more necessary than ever? So perhaps you can tell us what challenges you've seen from customers and how they've seen that's causing this growth in ADCs. Is it more applications, or you know, what is it the customers are doing that's consuming so much ADC?
Yeah, no, Jason, very valid point. A lot of time people say that, hey, ADC is now a commodity market, and my response usually is that, look, on a dining table, salt and pepper are commodity, but you need it on every single table, right? You can't have your food without salt and pepper. So
Mhm.
ADCs are like that today, right? We are in this era of digital transformation, which started several years back, but most of the enterprise companies are still going through the journey, right? As part of digital transformation, you are modernizing your application stacks, you're becoming more agile, you're automating your workflows, you're becoming more cloud-like, right? So,
Mhm.
you're automating your on-prem deployments, you're trying to be hybrid multi-cloud. And in all of this, you're doing is because you want better application experience, whether it's an employee application or a consumer facing application. So end of it, it's all to deliver reliably an application and also secure it, right? So how would you do that without an ADC? How would you do that without somebody who understands how do you securely and reliably deliver an application? So ADCs are truly part of every single conversation.
Okay. And I think that there are more applications going on. I mean, I think it was MuleSoft and Deloitte recently reported that an average company has 1,061 applications that they deploy. Now, their numbers may be a little skewed, and we might look at Okta, who are reporting around 200 applications, but both are saying it's going up. The number of applications going up, which seems to imply that you need more ADCs for that, and that's fine. But it's not just load balancers, right? So, what are the business processes or technical changes that are driving the need for application deliveries and making them more prevalent over and above the load balancers? What's changing in those applications that makes that more important?
Yeah. Uh, no, great question, Jason. I think one of the most fundamental shift is happening in the industry is in the application architecture.
Right.
You know, and the shift from the monolith architectures to modern app architectures, which are built on top of the microservices environments using Kubernetes, control plane, or OpenShift platform. These architectures require a lot more application delivery support and engine as compared to the monolith architecture, right? In the monolith architecture, you needed a big box in front of your application. In the microservices architecture, you break down your big monolith app into hundreds and sometimes thousands of microservices. How do, like, it's so good to look at it in a way that, hey, all of these, you're trying to create independent microservices, but eventually they all depend on each other to operate, right?
Mm.
And hence there is a lot of traffic which flows in between these microservices, which is called the east-west traffic, right? We have seen at several customers that if you don't do the right kind of proxying for your east-west traffic, it just slows down your entire application. And it is complex as compared to how it was earlier, because earlier all of these applications were sitting were modules inside the same application, so they would talk to each other without having to go through the network. Today, all of them have to go through the network, and all of them, think about 100 microservices wanting to talk to each other, so it's like 100 into 100 matrix, right? Would
Right.
you allow everybody to have an independent connection with everybody else? It's just gonna go, it's just gonna go out of control. And that's where you need the east-west proxies. That's where, and it's not just proxy, right? How do you understand what's going wrong? If one of these microservices fail and the application gets impacted, how do you know about it, right? So application availability, application performance, or the whole observability ecosystem is developed around these new architecture. So, I mean, this would be one of the main, kind of one of the major examples, Jason, of how the change on application architectures are driving more and more need for reliable ADC and reliable technologies. And the other one would be going towards multiple stacks, like you want it across multiple clouds, and how do
Yeah.
you provide seamlessness, simplicity, how do you create a single stack which works reliably across all the clouds? So that would be the other part of the conversation.
Yeah. So
So
I mean, I think it was IDC again who predicted there will be 750 million new modern cloud native applications by 2025, which is the benefits of which are, it's easier to scale and it's decoupled, and that's fantastic. But it does exactly as you say, I think, create this problem of communication overload, as it were. And to your other point, I think Flexera called out in 2022, 89% of customers are now adopting a multi-cloud strategy. And therein lies its own problem. Sure, the cost benefits of this and the flexibility and resource utilization, but all of those are actually benefits, but problems in disguise, I think. And then of course we look at the security. Applications are the hole in the network, and I want to come back to that a little bit later on. But um, why are ADCs important to address those issues then, do you think?
yeah, absolutely. Uh, think about it, Jason. Like when customers say, "Hey, I want to be hybrid multi-cloud," how do you really be hybrid multi-cloud? So when we say we want to be hybrid multi-cloud, we are essentially, the underlying assumption is that I have an application stack which can run anywhere, and I can easily switch the application stack from one environment to another environment. I can scale on demand. I can automate the entire ecosystem, have seamless experience across, and this does not happen uh, you know, by how you transition your applications to hybrid multi-cloud. So think about it. Uh, if you transition your application to, let's say, AWS, and you're not thinking about how your stack would build up, which can be run exactly in same order on Azure or on your uh, private VMware cloud, then you're going to get logged in into that single cloud. And we see customers getting logged in into the single cloud and trying to call themselves hybrid multi-cloud, which is not true. And then at certain point where they want to kind of move around and move out, it becomes really challenging. So in an application delivery stack, ADC is the most critical footprint, which allows you to be platform agnostic.
Two topics we kind of mentioned, I want to tie them together. We talked a bit about performance, and this has always been pretty important for businesses, but with this acceleration of modernization, it's become, a top imperative for many organizations. Why do you think modernization has really bumped up performance to, a top imperative?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that, Brian, because in our experience, right, we see when customers get to modernization, right, app modernization, I think they're hit by poor performance, right? Because the moment you break down the app into different microservices, see, in the modern architecture, it is really, really easy to orchestrate, really easy to automate. It becomes so simple to upgrade these microservices on their own. It's really easy to kind of release your code or release your capabilities in chunks, right? You can say, hey, I only want to release it in a certain region. I want to test it out. And if it works, I'm going to replicate it to like those are really good benefits of these modern architectures. But then what happens is because you're breaking it down in so many components and pieces and everything needs to interact with each other, like before you can send a response out for a request, there need to be like at least 10 API calls in between the microservices.
Hmm.
You have to come back and assess that how is it impacting the performance, right? And this is where we see customers coming getting back to us because a lot of these microservices projects are led by the DevOps teams, right? But IT gets involved when these projects need to be rolled out and be given out to their consumers or the actual users, and that's where they get back to us that hey, we re-architected, it looks great, but we don't see the same performance, or we see application performance issues, or we see lack of observability. What can you guys come and do? And this is where we kind of, again, not kind of trying to get back to NetScaler, but as you see the ADC stack, you have a stack for east-west use case. You have a stack purposefully built for north-south use case. You have the observability exporter endpoints. You have the ingress controllers who understand the entire deployment and brings together the kind of lost performance and the scalability to these newer architectures.
Okay. And the performance is obviously important to the business's applications. Many customers sort of differentiate themselves on user experience, and it's a common known facts out there that Google research said that 53% of users will abandon a site if it takes more than 3 seconds, and nearly 60% of American consumers will switch companies because of poor customer service. And when the application performance is really the only engagement you have with customers, that becomes crucial. So performance is absolutely crucially important. Now, you mentioned something else there about observability. So why is that so crucial to applications?
Yeah. So, as we are in this era of digital transformation, connecting back to our previous discussion, when you say, hey, I'm a hybrid multi-cloud application stack or hybrid multi-cloud company, we support different infrastructures, different application stack. every single time you add a new component to your stack or you add a new infrastructure, your ability to understand the workflow, your ability to understand where are the loose endpoints, where your ability to observe the application performance goes down, right? So every time you bring a new equation into the picture, you essentially add more complexity,
Hmm.
and you need better observability solutions which can tell you that, hey, you know what, the problem of your application experience is really in between these two servers, or this is a particular endpoint where we see the problem, or this is a particular microservice which is slowing it down, or this is the API for
Mm.
which the response is so big that it takes a lot of time to respond back. Like, these data points you don't get out of the box, right?
Okay. So why are ADCs the best thing to get
Yes,
that observability?
yes, because think about it. There is nothing else in between an ADC and application,
Good point. Mm.
right? There would be things before the ADC, like your layer 4 firewalls, in some
Which is
cases layer 7 firewalls, and other technologies out there. But in between the ADC and application, there is nothing else. So we, that's why I say, hey, we become the last line of defense.
Mhm.
And we become the last line of defense, not just for security but for observability equally, because we are the guys who have to hold it together.
Mhm.
We need to know what's going on in the application stack. We need to know which microservice is responding slow. We need to get to the level, and today we are innovating to get to the point where we can actually pinpoint on which application API, which is internal infrastructure, right, is actually taking more time than rest of the APIs, and tell the developers that, hey, this is something you need to work on. This
So
is where you need to tune the API to perform better, or a database interaction which is going slow, right? So all of this we are codifying in the ADC, so that the ADC becomes the super intelligent platform which pulls together the application infrastructure and brings out all the observability issues, and then goes and integrates with your ecosystem. Like, for example, a Splunk, right? A lot of
mm.
enterprises have kind of standardized on Splunk. There are people who use New Relic or SolarWinds, right? And we are integrating with all of these ecosystems, providing them the application observability use cases. And these ecosystems bring in the security and other use cases from other endpoints.
So what you're saying, I think, if I've interpreted correctly, is that the ADC sits in a unique position in the environment or in the network or in front of the application, and it sees all of the transactions, and therefore it is the best tool to use for observability. And you can feed this into any of the other collation tools that you have to get the insights out that you require. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And I want to just move on from that. So thank you for that. But you mentioned security, so I want to dive into that a little bit more. Um, and I've got a bunch of statistics here as well. But in your opinion, you know, is application security becoming more important?
It is. It is. Like, you remember the journey back in 2002, 2003, when secure socket layers become the hard thing, that, hey, you want it to be encrypted, right? And
Hmm.
why you wanted it to be encrypted? Because you wanted to secure the e-commerce payments back in those days. And then you understood that, hey, just encryption is not enough, because you could break into using SQL injection. So the web application firewalls came in, then the bot protection came in. Now we're talking about API security. But if you really see in this whole evolution, the really important thing to note, Jason, is that back in the days we were only worried about PCI compliance, or we were only worried about payment transactions. Today, every piece of data is critical. Today, it's no more about, hey, secure the online payment and don't worry about the rest.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
data about the user, the data about the application is equally or more important than just your payment transaction, right? So suddenly, what has happened is a use case which was very focused on certain kind of transactions or application footprint is suddenly become a use case which needs to be applied to the entire application. And it does not matter whether you're delivering the application internally or externally, because most of the attacks originate from people who are inside, right?
Hmm.
So you need to have application security, technology across the application footprint if you want to be really secure and safe.
Okay, then let me pose the question that I posed before, but this time for security. Why are ADCs the best tool to consolidate that security?
Yes. So it's a very important question because, see, when we talk about ADCs or our platform, we never say that we are a security device, right? What we say is, hey, we provide you integrated security experience for use cases.
Hmm.
We for the use cases where we are the best to give you that benefit. For example, if we deliver an application and you want to do web application firewall for the entire application, we are the best positioned device to do that because we see all the transactions. We are doing SSL offload. In several cases, we are also authenticating the user with the Active Directory or Azure AD or Okta. And we understand the context of the user. We understand the context of the application. We already see the entire flow. We are logical at that point to restrict and protect the application against any kind of web attack, right? OWASP top 10, all of the other attacks which come in the wild, any kind of API attack. And just the other thing I would mention is that it's not just about we protecting the application data from these attacks. We also protect the applications themselves. You remember Log4j? Like when Log4j came, everybody was worried about, hey, how am I going to upgrade all of my application stack behind, right? All of my infrastructure behind. And customers who were using our products, it was just a one signature.
Hmm.
We told our customers, hey, download this one signature, turn on WAF, and the ADC will make sure none of the Log4j attack can ever make to your infrastructure. So it is a two-pronged security approach where we protect the application natively for the data which is being transacted with the application. And
Hmm.
then we protect the application software from the vulnerabilities which are there in the application itself, because everything goes through us. So we can put the right signatures, we can put the right rules on the ADCs to protect the infrastructure which is behind us.
Right. We've looked at that history of ADC, from load balancers to ADC or through on, and we've in my mind it's showing someone with a website, and you talked about the SSL and the protecting the transactions, but business is increasingly about machine to machine communication. So how do you see ADCs helping with this?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, if we look at our own install base, a couple years back, we would see API traffics, but it was always the small portion. Today, in our customers and install base, we see the kind of machine to machine interaction at a point where it is overtaking the traffic which is user bound, right? So we are almost at the point where the APIs and the machine to machine interaction is going to be bigger portion of the traffic we process and deliver as compared to the actual user traffic, right? And the stacks like the modern application architectures are helping because there's all APIs, everything goes through the proxy, and then all of the applications which used to be applications earlier are now platforms. You want your partners and consumers to interact with the application using APIs. So suddenly we see a lot of applications where we would only see users. Now we see a lot of API traffic, and the challenge is that you have put all of the security infrastructure for the user bound traffic.
Hmm.
You allowed the APIs, but never planned for securing the APIs. And APIs are really, I mean, if you find out the problem and the vulnerability in the API, it's really easy to exploit because there's nobody protecting them, right? And that's where we see a lot of concerns coming up and a lot of customers looking at us and saying, hey, tell me which are the shadow APIs in my environment. Tell me which are the API parameters which are not signed in. Tell me about compliance issues with my APIs. So, back to your point on machine-to-machine interaction, this is what we see happening in the world with the customers.
And
Nice.
I think that I agree with you. It does seem to be moving that direction, and the ADC it's already in front of the application. So it seems to be the logical place to protect the APIs as well. And I give you some examples. With APIs are designed to get to the heart of the data fast and to move that data around. And I think a lot of the breaches that we see have been via APIs. I mean, or at least the data exfiltration is that way. So Move It in June 2023 impacted 200 organizations, 17.5 million individuals. T-Mobile, okay, a lot smaller than its November breach, but in May and January this year, they had a lot of records taken, and that would be through those APIs. The Yum brands, I think it's KFC and so on like that. They're still paying for their breach, and they've had to close 300 locations. Whether they're related, I don't know, but they continue to cost the company money, adding new security measures, alerting customers, and brand perception is obviously the big one, right? And all of this could have been prevented with the right application security tools in place. And a good place to start with that, from what I'm hearing, is with the ADC. Right.
Nice.
Okay.
Now, we've had a really great conversation, but I do know you are quite a busy man, so I'll try to wrap us up here. So, on the NetScaler podcast, we like to finish every episode with some type of bold prediction. So, I was hoping you might, give us our inaugural first, bold forecast, if you don't mind, about what you might see in the application delivery controller industry.
Yeah, I mean, my bold forecast is that, back to the conversation on, hey, if we are commodity, you're going to need it more and more. And if you want your digital transformation journey to be seamless, you need a predictable stack. You need a stack which can seamlessly work across multiple infrastructures, multiple application architectures. Customers who want higher performance, better experience, they depend on technology which is enterprise ready, which can provide you that. So, to me, the real forecast is that we are up for very, very exciting time, and at the time where we will see a lot of growth in our core technology and core business.
In the
Awesome. Thank you
ADC
so
world.
much.
Okay.
In the ADC world, yeah. ADC, integrated security, integrated observability.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate you guys calling me in, and it's a great conversation. Always good to talk to you, Brian. Thank you, Jason, for partnering all this while.
Always a pleasure, Abhilash.
Thanks everyone for tuning into this episode of the NetScaler podcast. You can find the audio version of our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or the NetScaler community website. You can also find us on YouTube if you'd like to watch the video version of this interview. And if you're already here, leave us a comment on what you thought or what you might like to hear next. In our next episode, we'll be joined by Al Taylor, co-founder and CTO of Cloud DNA, where we'll discuss the pros and cons of a consolidated approach to app delivery and security. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.